A crazy caper that might just work. The Thursday movie at 8:30 on 7.
Thirsty? There's artificial flavour, artificial fizz, or natural juicy apples. Thirst? Grab an apple.
We got to thinking. Westinghouse were first with fan-forced cooking, so let's be first to give it to everyone. A Westinghouse fan-forced oven, now in every price range.
Good thinking, Westinghouse.
In Japan, the written word is an art. An art canon continues with their personal electronic typewriter, Typestar. Top print quality and full-size keyboard goes where you go. Canon Typestar. Perfection.
This new boyfriend is turning out to be a bit of a nuisance.
Then remove him.
Your boyfriend is Bodhi.
How glamorous your spy.
Bodhi caught in an explosive love affair. Caught in an explosive love affair. The Professionals, 8:30 Saturday.
Good evening. Western Australian mining magnate Lang Hancock and a Filipino woman are key figures in an immigration case now under special investigation by federal government officials. The case of 35-year-old Rosemarie Laxon, a close companion of Mr Hancock, has led Canberra to examine the procedures of the Perth branch of the Immigration Department. Officials are also checking the circumstances under which a visa was issued to Ms Laxon by the Australian Embassy in the Philippines. This report from Paul Lynham in Perth.
Rosemarie Laxon, a former air hostess, model and saleswoman, comes from one of the wealthy families that are the elite of the Philippines' sugar city of Bacolod, the city where Father Brian Gore was imprisoned. Her life story was published recently in this Filipino magazine, which describes her as a rose in an Australian Eden. That Eden is Perth, for Ms Laxon arrived here in March last year on a 3-month visitor's visa, and soon after she applied for a job as housekeeper at the home of mining millionaire Lang Hancock. But according to her remarkably frank magazine interview, she joined the Hancock household as a house guest rather than a housekeeper. And a month later, she applied for a different visa so she could stay in Australia and work for him. Although the Immigration Department refused, Miss Laxon still lives in Perth, in this top-security luxury apartment building with no name on the front door and an unlisted telephone number. The woman who answered the intercom said she was Miss Laxon's friend and that Miss Laxon never spoke with newsmen.
I don't think she's ever talked to anybody about herself in personal ways. She shies away from reporters.
Why is that?
Well, she just doesn't like it.
In December last year, Ms Laxon applied for residency under the Business Migration Program as a partner in a proposed venture to export Western Australian wines to Southeast Asia. That too was refused. State government officials doubted the extent of her business background. Her own version of her background conflicted with a version that had already been given to immigration officials by Mr Hancock. And Ms Laxon proposed to invest only $30,000 in the scheme. At that time, $250,000 was the minimum needed to qualify as a business migrant. But soon after her application was rejected, Ms Laxon's bank notified the Immigration Department that her account had been credited with $250,000 from overseas, and the Perth office of the department approved her application. The source of the funds was not clear, nor was it certain that the money was to be used in the wine export venture. Moreover, at no stage did Perth immigration officials ask the Australian Embassy in Manila to inquire into Miss Laxon's background. However, by then Canberra had heard of the case, and in May, about 10 weeks ago, Perth's approval was overturned at the last minute. Then, early in June, Mr Roy Fernandez, Australia's ambassador to the Philippines, met Mr Hancock and Ms Laxon in Manila, and that day Ms Laxon was issued with an extended visitor's visa valid for 4 years, a visa allowing her to stay in Australia for up to 6 months at a time. The following day, Ms Laxon returned to Australia with Mr Hancock, and soon after that, the case was referred to the Immigration Department's Internal Investigations Unit. I'm told that the investigators are examining several other cases in which the Perth office of the department has handled applications under the Business Migration Program, a program designed to attract entrepreneurs with skill and capital to create jobs.
In Perth late this afternoon, Mr Hancock said he would only comment through his lawyers. Nurses will begin a campaign of industrial disruption in all Victorian public hospitals from midnight tomorrow night. A meeting of key members of the Royal Australian Nursing Federation tonight decided on the action, claiming the government seemed determined to force an all-out confrontation. The campaign will involve the nurses once again withdrawing from non-nursing duties. The nurses claim the government and the Health Commission have been deceitful and uncompromising in negotiations to settle the dispute. However, tonight's meeting did decide to send a representative to a nurses' board hearing on the dispute tomorrow.
The dispute is over the definition of nursing and non-nursing duties. Today, about 200 nurses at the Royal Children's Hospital stopped work for 24 hours because administrators failed to guarantee that the nursing budget would not be used to pay non-nursing staff. The hospital's chief executive, Dr. Barry Catchlove, appealed for a summit meeting of parties to discuss all health concerns. Nurses rejected the proposal. They also announced that they would not return to working party negotiations on non-nursing duties following what they claimed was a provocative government attitude at talks yesterday.
We believe that that really caused us to certainly reconsider our position, and we don't believe that there's any merit in returning to the negotiating table.
A number of agreements have been reached with the Nursing Federation, and they've not worked because for some reason or other the nurses have decided that they can no longer agree with their agreement. So we're using the formal conciliation process of the Registered Nurses Board.
Canberra is also faced with the medical dispute tonight. Surgeons there are refusing to carry out non-urgent surgery on blue-collar workers and federal MPs because of the Medicare dispute.
The surgeons are upset because trade unionists have put bans on an extension to the John James Private Hospital. The argument's basically over Medicare. The trade unions argue the extension, a clinic, will take work away from the public hospital, and they're not happy. The surgeons hoped the Conciliation and Arbitration Commission would tell the unions to lift the bans, but it didn't. To strike back, the surgeons imposed bans of their own, refusing to issue sickness certificates or to carry out non-urgent surgery on both blue-collar workers and federal Labour MPs. And tonight, the dispute spread even further, with gravediggers joining in. They, for their part, are refusing to bury or cremate any surgeons who died during the dispute.
One of the key members of the Mr Asia drug ring has been sentenced to 23 years jail for heroin trafficking. Darryl Lee Sorby will have to serve a minimum of 18 years before being considered for parole. Pamela Graham has the details.
Darryl Lee Sorby, a 33-year-old New Zealander, was convicted on 5 counts of conspiracy to traffic heroin.
Mr Justice Anderson said today that Sorby came to Australia prompted by callous greed to partake in the flourishing drug trade. And during his trial, the jury heard that Sorby became the Melbourne link in the now notorious Mr Asia and Terence Clark international drug syndicate.
In the Supreme Court today, Mr Justice Anderson said Sorby was born in New Zealand, where he served in the Navy, and there met acquaintances who later became his fellow conspirators in heroin dealings. Mr Justice Anderson said there were 13 co-conspirators, and he said one of the unusual aspects of this trial was that most of them gave evidence against Sorby, including his wife. Evidence showed a large quantity of heroin passed through Sorby's hands between 1978 and 80. He had set up a Melbourne organisation to procure heroin from Sydney and distribute it in Melbourne through his co-conspirators. Justice Anderson said Sorby sought to explain his personal wealth from gold futures deals, successful betting and car sales. But the jury was entitled, he said, to be sceptical in the absence of evidence. As Mr Justice Anderson said to Sorby, the scales weigh heavily against you.
Now to Los Angeles, and for the second time at these Olympics, an Australian boxer has won a fight only to have the decision awarded against him. As Gary Wilkinson reports, it was a day and a fight Jeff Fennick will never forget.
Red Sapolsky went into the fight with much more experience and a reputation as a big hitter. But Fennick's recent form was outstanding and he's rated number 8 in the world. However, the Yugoslav did a shade the better in the first round, even in the judgment of the Australian coach, Ed Wishes.
That's a close round. I give him the edge, 2019. You got to come. This guy is not that good. You can whip him. block, get a little closer before you throw your right.
Fenwick took the advice and scored well with some straight lefts and a couple of good rights in close. He certainly seemed to have the edge in the second.
I reckon I won the second round pretty convincingly, more than he would have won the first round for sure, and won the third round. I couldn't even catch a bloke in the third round, he was running so much.
Both fighters obviously knew it was going to be close, and there were some tough exchanges. Red Zapovsky shook the Australian with a left and right, although Fenwick landed some good scoring blows near the end.
Into the last 10 seconds. Fenwick going out after him, sends one into the midriff, but Red Zapovsky keeps moving. Fenwick gets a couple more in. There's the end of round number 3.
The decision was a long time coming. Just as it had been for our lightweight Renato Cornet earlier in the week, the judges were split 3-2 in the Australians' favour, and the vote was automatically referred to the international jury. And again, they saw it differently and ruled 4-1 the other way. A devastating blow to Jeff Fenwick.
My reactions, I'm pretty disappointed, like 2.5 years of hard training and no work.